Witchcraft and Voodoo. I'm Sable Aradia. I'm here with my co-host Lilith Dorsey. And if you don't know who we are or what we're doing by now, well, that's okay, because we'll tell you. We're discussing the similarities and differences between our traditions, witchcraft in my case, and voodoo in Lilith's.
Yep.
And I guess our topic today, now we're having something. Oh no, I had a weird blip again. Okay, so we're having technical difficulties tonight. Bear with us. I'm sorry, this is going to be badly edited. I apologize. I'm in the middle of National Novel Writing Month, and it's my turn to put it up on my channel. So we'll try to recognize the blips if they appear, and we will try to repeat what we said if we think that it has been stopped. In the meantime, tonight our topic is animals in our traditions and how we relate to them, and maybe some of the symbolism behind them, the links in our mythologies, and I don't know, our personal relationships with animals, I guess. And where would we like to start with that, Lilith? What do you think?
I think voodoo and Santeria gets a real, negative association with their connection with animals because of animal sacrifice and things like that. So it's something I really wanted to talk about just to help people better understand that. And also there is a lot of connection between deity and specific animals, which I think is similar to your tradition that I would also like to talk a little bit about. So I'm excited about doing this. We're always looking for topics. So if anybody has topics, send those in. But, I thought this would be a really good thing to talk about.
Great. Okay. Well, sure. Animal sacrifice is not generally something that is done in most traditions of witchcraft. There are exceptions, right? There are people who call themselves witches who practice various forms of witchcraft who do use animal sacrifice, and that is probably more the famtrads, family traditions, and traditional witchcraft paths. But Wicca tends to be pretty aggressive about disassociating itself from animal sacrifice. I personally have no strong feelings about that one way or the other. I don't have any ethical objections. When I joined the church organization, the Wiccan church organization I was part of, signed ethical statements, said we weren't going to participate in animal sacrifice, and I guess that was mostly to be palatable to the public. I personally don't care, right? I'm not hung up on the idea. So that's about it from my perspective, because it's very limited, right? Now, what does voodoo and Santeria have to say about it? Why is it done? What's it all about?
It's not done lightly. I think that's the first thing I want people to really understand, that it's not like we're I'm not saying it does happen. Certainly there are people that do sacrifices, on a weekly basis or something like that. But for us, it's usually done when there's something serious is going to happen. And I like to ask people, what if your loved one was going to have an operation and they needed a medicine that came from some part of an animal that couldn't be removed without the animal dying? Would they use that medicine? And almost every time I've asked this, someone has said, yes. You're not going to let your child or your spouse die because they need something from a chicken gizzard or whatever, so I think that for us, it's the same thing. It's that this is necessary in order to really save someone or heal someone or alleviate some really serious problem that this person is having. And the other thing that we really go into it with the thought that, if this is something that's really important, this is something that we would give our own life for. And I think that's always somewhere in the mind of the priest or the priestess when they're doing some kind of sacrifice. That said, it's something that people train for, very similar to some of, when something's killed in a halal way or in a kosher way, people have to be trained in order to do that. It has to be blessed. So those similar things are going on. You have to have a ceremony in Santeria, it's called, or Lukumi, it's called, take the knife. So you have to be a female that's not menstruating anymore, or a male, and this ceremony is done. So I think that those are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have, because I think people really think of it as some sort of weird bloodlust thing that they get from the media, and that's really not, in my experience, what's happening. A lot of temples also don't do any kind of animal sacrifice. I mean, we don't do that as a rule in my house, but there are a lot of them that do it, again, for specific things. I'm not saying I've never been in a ceremony that has done it. Yes, I've been in ceremonies where birds and other things like that were sacrificed, but it was always done quickly and humanely. And if you're healing somebody from cancer, you're not going to eat that meat. But if it's just something like a yearly, offering that you have to give, usually that meat is eaten, or it's brought to donated to the poor or the homeless or something like that, and cooked for them and served for them. So it's not like it goes to waste, again, in a lot of ways, So I think that's usually how I explain things to people, because I think this is what people are really harboring, these kinds of thoughts that are very different from the reality of what's happening.
Yeah, fair enough. I think people, watch too many Hollywood movies and have some very strange ideas, right? There, in the broader pagan community, there tends to be it's sort of a conflict, right? And there's two very different sides of things, right? There are, especially among, the Wiccan influenced types, or, sort of a general NeoPagan, right? There's a lot of dedicated vegans, right? And they're opposed to not just animal sacrifice, but eating meat entirely, right? And hey, that's cool. I understand where you're coming from. And, I have a lot of personal ethical issues with the way we treat our meat animals in the industrial farming culture that we have. I think a lot of it is unnecessarily cruel, and certainly a lot of it's unhealthy. And, so I get where they're coming from there, right? I try to be an ethical omnivore myself. I tried being a vegan. This lasted about 3 days. I just could not do it. I'm anemic, right? And I guess that if I don't want to take huge amounts of elemental iron, I kind of need to eat meat. So I try to consider it ethically when I can. I get it, sourced from free range, ethical farms. I can't always afford that, but I do my best. I certainly won't buy feedlot meat. I will have nothing to do with that, and I am willing to pay a couple more bucks every time I get a thing of eggs to make sure it's free range, right? So, and that's, and I'll do more, right? When they come up with the vat meat, I'm there.
That's good.
Coming. It's coming. They're cloning. Apparently, it's cost $20 now to clone a burger, right?
Wow.
Their cloned meat. So
Wow.
I'm on board, right? So okay, and then there's the other side of things, right? And these are people who tend to practice more Reconstructionist type paths. There's a lot of people who are, say, traditional Greek practitioners, right? And in traditional Greek religion, right, sacrifice was a part of it, right? The idea was, I don't know, I don't remember, and someone is going to tell me, and I hope they do, because there's a story about how they made a deal with the gods, but the gods were kind of tricked, right? They're like, yeah, we're good. And the portion of the meat that goes to the gods is the stuff that we wouldn't eat anyway, right? And only ethically, as quickly and as painlessly as possible, like halal, which I absolutely approve of. I think I try to eat halal when I can too, for that why, right? But they cook the rest of the animal, and it feeds the public as well as the priests and everybody else, and then the tripes and whatnot are burnt as an offering, which I imagine smelled absolutely horrific, but
yeah.
but it's a thing, right? And then I know that some Norse pagans of various stripes will, again, take an animal like say they're going to have a pig for a feast. They'll kill it cleanly and ethically, make offering. Part of it is offered to the gods, and the rest of it feeds the kindred, right? And again, I don't see what the problem is with this. Right? I understand.
Oh no, I'm losing you.
Killing an animal as part of ritual, if you're also going to eat it as part of the ritual. You know what I mean? Oh, did you lose me for a minute?
Yeah, I lost
you
you for a
froze for just
second.
a sec. So, oh shoot,
Just a
where was
second.
I?
Like, maybe the last minute.
Okay, all right. So
when you switch from Hellenic to Norse.
Norse. Okay, they'll often like kill, say, a pig, right, in a sacred way, right, and then have a feast, and part of the offering part of it will be offered to the gods, and the rest of it will feed the kindred. And again, I don't have any problems with that. I don't think that I don't understand why people have problems with that. I think that there must be some superstitious association with it that comes from biblical teaching or something. How is this a bad thing to, kill and I mean, you're going to eat it's an animal, it wasn't born as pork chops, right? Somebody killed it, it came to the supermarket, you bought it, you brought it home, and you're eating it, and an animal gave its life for you, right? And so what's the harm if you kill it there, offer some of it to your gods because you're sharing, right, and then eat it fresh? I don't understand the problem and why people want to parse this difference, right? But
no, they do. They want to make this distinction. And I think that it seems very, again, I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail, but it seems very naive in a way. I had somebody arguing with me once about this who was wearing leather shoes, and to me, like,
wow.
if I want to have this as part of my spirituality and you only want to have it as part of your shoes, that's okay, but I don't necessarily think shoes is more of a noble cause than spirituality, and I was a vegetarian for years too, but like you, I was anemic, so it didn't last it for very long either, so. And yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you about all those points. And I think that people really do need to be mindful of their own traditions, because like you're talking about some Hellenic practices or some Norse practices, I've known people who were British trad Wicca that, again, I'm not going to out anybody for what they do in circle, but that has certainly been something that is told to me has been done. And, so I think that this is definitely much more widespread than I think people really are aware of. And I think that much of the, back talk about it is really kind of modern, especially with the case that happened with the, church in Florida, the Church of Babaluaye in Florida, that actually ended up going to the Supreme Court about animal sacrifice. So I think that's really when most people got it in the forefront of their minds that this was happening and wanted to have a lot of outrage about it.
You hear a lot of anti-Muslim stuff as well. It gets all up in people's faces about halal. And I'm like, dude, have you been to a feedlot? Have you been to a slaughterhouse? Right? And you think that lifting up this, goat and slitting its throat and it's dead in like a couple of seconds is somehow worse? I don't know. I don't think people really understand is what it is. They don't know what actually happens. They haven't done any research into where their food comes from, right? They think that they were born as pork chops.
Right.
And, I mean, when you're eating meat, an animal died, beware of that. I think it's important to be aware of that. Spiritually, as a witch, right? I'm always aware of that, right? My tradition comes from a British traditional lineage with a lot of eclectic influence. I don't think there would be anything in my path that would be at all an ethical conflict with doing exactly what you say with the sacrifice made in circle. I don't see why that would be a problem. And I think that, we want to share food in a community and share with our gods, right, as well, right? So yeah, again, right, I don't understand what people's issue is.
No, it's true. But I think that I mean, I think that this brings us into the other portion of our topic where we were going to talk about, certain deities having sacred animals, sacred connections to animals. And I think that's something that a lot of people have, no matter what spirituality, you are, that they have a certain connection to certain types of animals or specific animals. Do you want to talk about that? Because I know, like, you guys have way more familiars than we do. We do have,
Familiars.
yes, we do have,
Okay.
connections, but we don't have familiars per se.
Okay, familiars. In my opinion, most of the our relationship with familiars, right, as we describe them, is mostly just a really close bond with our pets, right? But we're kind of, I think we poke fun at ourselves a little bit, right? Like, the idea of a familiar, of course, comes from this concept that witches were, they would put their spirits into, say, their cat, right, and then go spy on the neighbor, right, or whatever. And that's an old part of folklore. And there's a belief, right? Some people do practice trying to do that kind of thing, right? They describe it on Game of Thrones as being a warg, where you can put your consciousness into an animal that you have a bond with and look kind of through their eyes and experience their senses. And some people do practice trying to do that kind of thing with their animal that they have a relationship to. I think, I don't know, I never did that with my my pets, but then some people will also use that relationship with their familiar, right, in healing practices. And I think that's much more common. Animals are very intuitive, right? And they often, like, your dog can smell cancer, right? You can't, but they can. Your cat will hear things that you won't hear, right? And some believe that they have a sixth sense as well that we don't, or that we're not as good at, right? And so getting them to kind of help you, sense, is something wrong, right? Where is the illness, right? Maybe if you believe in spirits, which of course not all witches do, but most of us do, right? They can sometimes be thought of as being able to see spirits more effectively. Like when your cat, looks at something and then freaks out for no reason and, jumps inside, they say that they've seen a fairy or something, right? So we do have that kind of healing work that we do with them, right? But of course, the idea comes from an older folk magic, or this was also adopted into a lot of the propaganda against witches. Oh, they can turn into cats and they can turn into bats and they spy on you and they bite you and they, attack you in the night like a werewolf and all this stuff. And I don't know, right? I've never seen anybody do it. So, I've never even heard of anybody trying to do it, right? I have heard of people who say that they sometimes have dreams where they're running with their wolf dog, right? Or they're looking through the eyes of their cat, right? But I've also heard people who do shape-shifting work when they're doing spirit work, right? Like they believe they have an affinity with a particular animal. So when they're doing, say, work in the spirit realm or dream work, which is, for those who don't know, work that you do when you're dreaming and interacting in other people's dreams, right? That they can shift into animals or run with the animals that they have a bond with. So this is the way I would describe familiars, right? And the differences between how they're portrayed in Hollywood and what witches today actually do, right?
Right.
I guess that's about what I have to say about that topic.
We have, like I
I don't
said,
know.
we don't have familiars, but we have one of the deities, one of the Orisha, Oya, as seen as a shapeshifter. And there's a story that kind of reminds me of the Silky story, where she removes her skin and turns into either a gazelle or an antelope and decides to go to the market. And, so there's this whole sort of changing where she can be one way in the woods and another way in the market, so that you can sort of transform for whatever situation that you're in. So there is that. And then there's definitely certain animals that are associated with different Orisha or Loa. Marie Laveau was said to have a serpent that's actually where the word zombie comes from. Some believe it was because her serpent was dedicated to Simbi, which is one of the Loa in Haitian Voodoo. So I think that that's interesting, just of note. But it's also interesting to know, talk about snakes. Haitian Voodoo has Dambala and Aida Wedo, which are both sacred serpents that are also, anthropomorphized into Loa that can watch over us and protect us, sort of a mother and father kind of figure that is seen there. But it's interesting because Haitian Voodoo is very different than some of the other African traditions back in Africa, where you really don't get snakes because they don't have snakes really in their culture that much. So I do think that's it. For somebody who likes snakes like me, I think that's really interesting that it's really sort of a new world thing and it's associated with African tradition.
Snakes have symbology in witchcraft as well, right? Snakes are seen as shapeshifters, right? Sort of a shapeshifter totem because, of course, they shed their skin, right? They're associated with Lilith, who is, well, I mean, that should be obvious, right? But
Sure.
for those who are unfamiliar, right, Lilith is regarded as a much maligned goddess figure in most of modern witchcraft, especially Dianic traditions, or feminist goddess traditions, where she is a feminist icon, right? So they're associated with her. Sometimes they're associated with other, quote, dark goddesses of the underworld, transformation, death, right? They're also associated with Hindu elements because of the association with the rising of Kundalini, which is often described as a serpent climbing up the chakras, right? And modern Wicca tends to incorporate a lot of elements of that as well, right? And I don't know. I think it's really fascinating. We actually have a lot in common with a lot of Hindu tradition, or so I learned when my sister-in-law got married, because she married into a Hindu family and we were expected to participate in the various ceremonies, and we were talking to the priestesses doing the blessings, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, you guys are white Hindus, fine, that was pretty much what they said. So that was interesting, right?
That's great.
Yeah, there's all kinds of associations that we have. I think most of the deities that we actively work with have animals that are associated with them, either in their mythos or because of the qualities that they represent, right? So I don't really know if we have time. I probably won't go on for hours about it, but there's
right. We have 8 minutes. I'm counting.
We have 8 minutes according to our okay, yeah, the program's supposed to be half an hour. It never is, but yeah.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, that's right. So usually we're 45 minutes to minute 15, but yeah, or an hour 15 rather. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of associations. Just about every deity we work with has some god or some animal that's associated with them, or they can be said to take the form of various animals, right? Hern might be particularly important. There's supposed to be an association between all the various horned gods of various traditions. In Wicca, right, we acknowledge the horned god, who is supposed to be, he shows himself in different aspects. And of course, some people say they're totally different deities, and some people say they're different aspects of the same deity. I'm not getting into that debate right now. Both are perfectly legitimate witchcraft views, right? But horned animals are associated with him, right? So, deer and elk and goats and sheep and, bulls and all sorts of things, right? And I guess the idea is because the horned animals, it probably comes from the fact that the horned animals often are our prey animals or our domesticated food animals, right? And he's supposed to, he's associated with the wheel of the year, right? And his sacrifice each year is supposed to bring the earth back to life after winter, right? So that's, I'm sure, where the association comes from, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably go on too. Like each one of the Loa and Orisha have probably multiple animals associated with them. There's ones that are seen as companions, like Ogu is seen with dogs around him, you know, usually multiple dogs around him, you know, but then in some instances it'll be like, oh, well, you know, if you see a vulture at night, it means Oshun is coming, you know, things like that, that are sort of heralds or heralds of
Sure, heralds.
the, you know, the god or the goddess, which I think, you know, and again, some people can just look this up. They don't have to listen to us go on about all the different
Yeah,
ones.
there are websites that list them by association. There are books. You can find them. Yeah, it's they're out there. You don't need us to you don't need us to wax rhetoric
Okay.
about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I want to say? Are there, I mean, I suppose this is an extension. Like a lot of times look, I have a prop. A lot of times our ritual tools will be animal based. Does that happen a lot in witchcraft as well?
Depending, right? The
Oh,
more
wait, I'm losing you again.
vegan
Oh, no.
types who tend to be, live life.
All right, let's start again.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Props.
Sorry. Okay. So, like, props. Yes. Do we tend to use animal parts and associations in our ritual? It depends, right? Some are really very much against that, right? Like I said, and that's cool, right? That's a perfectly legitimate interpretation. Other people tend to really like using animal parts and feel a totemic association and a more of a, traditional kind of relationship with the totemic kind of aspect of the spirit of various animals. Me personally, I do tend to use them, right? I have skulls, and I have a fox face, and I have, a bunny fur, and I love all of this stuff, right? And it's meant to create a relationship between me and the spirit of the animal, right? And the qualities that they represent. And I want to either give, okay, I've got a boar skull, right? That for me, it represents a household guardian, right? And because boars are very protective, right? And I've got a, that kind of thing, right? Or I might, take the fox face, right? And I can't wear it, but you sort of could, because it's got little eyes. But for that, I would be like, okay, I want to be clever like a fox, and I want to draw upon that quality. It's, it's cleverness, and it's ingenuity, and it's, speed, and it's cunning, and right, and you develop those kind of associations, right? Some people even believe that the spirit of the animal is still connected to the bit of animal that they have, that they are using to make that connection, right? So, and that's kind of where we get things like lucky rabbit's foots, right? Lucky rabbit foots. Good grammar, Sable. Good one. But but the connection is rabbits are supposed to be lucky, right? Rabbits are
Right.
supposed to be blessed and fortunate. Right. So lots of things like that. I think I heard it.
Oh, wait, I lost you. Okay.
Technical problems tonight. I got a new computer, but the problem is I got a new webcam, and the webcam I think is so good in its quality that it's overwhelming my internet, because everything keeps lagging. I was doing a podcast last night, it didn't work. So now I'm on my old computer, and my old computer's memory is not quite up to snuff. So I'll try to figure it out by next time.
No, I don't think I'm doing that great over here technically either. I think I need a new router. I think that's what it is.
So maybe I do need a new router.
Yeah. Whatever. Hopefully we'll get it fixed. But anyway, what else did I have to say? I mean, for us, I think that it's sort of in the same vein that like this is a Oya horsetail whip, that we sort of see them as you know, with the concept of Ashe and things being the same energy pattern, the same energy signature as the Loa or Orisha, I think in a way that we can use some of these elements as sort of, I don't want to say it, but extensions, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. Extensions of the Loa or Orisha. So, you know, when I pick up one of the ritual items that is sacred to one of the Loa or Orisha, that's seen as an extension of them and can be used in a context to sort of connect to them and to help people who are there connect to them. I think that's really the use value in it for me, you know. And I think it's also really sort of, you know, I have my peacock sweater on and oh, that's what I wanted to say. Look, I put on my parrot earrings so I wouldn't forget. There's one, and I always love this. I have yet to see it actually done, but I have heard tale of different Lakumi houses where people will get a parrot to say the ritual calls, because the parrot is seen as having like clearness of mind. So the parrot's not sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go, you know, meet my wife later and I'm late with the rent, you know. So instead of having a human do it, they teach the calls to the parrots, and then they can say it with purity of mind and purity of thought and ritual, which I always thought was one of the most entertaining things. And I hope I do get to see it one of these days.
That is fantastic. What a neat thing. I totally think that's awesome.
Yeah, I always loved that idea. I always loved that.
Yeah, two things from what you said. Yeah, we do that too. The connection and extension of the deity that it's associated with. Lots of people use raven feathers, for example, or I have a raven skull, right, through which they make connection to the dark goddesses that are associated with ravens, like the Morrigan, right? And the idea of the clearness of mind and the parrot doing the calls. There is one thing where when we have a relationship with an animal that we describe as our familiar, who is one of our pets, one of the things that a special power they tend to have, and one of the ways in which you know that they're a familiar as opposed to just a pet, right, is that when you do ritual, they will show up and they want to be as close to the altar or you as possible, right? So, you know, your cat will come and sit underneath the altar table, and, you know, your dog will make sure to lie in the middle of the floor, right in the center of where everybody is gathered, even if they wouldn't normally do that, right? So, you know, and I have had those kind of relationships with my animals in the past, and my current cat is not a familiar, right? My dog was, but he died this year, so yeah. Yeah, it was sad. I'm very sad. I still miss him.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. It's hard. It's hard. Especially when they were close like that. I had a cat that was a familiar. She used to do tarot card readings. She would just sit there and like paw out the different cards and stuff like that. It was really
There's another
intense.
thing. Yeah, utilization in divination work. Yeah, I've heard that before from a couple of different people, actually. Neat that we have that in common too. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, we've hit our half-hour mark, or we're over our half-hour mark in case anybody's checking out there. So
we are.
I guess, is there anything else I wanted to say? No, I guess that's about it. I mean, I've known a lot of people that work with animals. There's, you know, again, if you want to study from this perspective, I think that there's some fantastic stuff more about the practices about sacrifice and things like that back in Africa. I'm particularly fond of the work of Jean Rouch, which it's a little intense for people who are not used to seeing this. But he made a film called Maitre Fou, The Mad Masters, which was the first ethnographic film, and it details sacrifice in Africa, so and possession.
Right.
So that's my recommendation about that.
Yeah. Let's see. Things that I would. Okay, so these tend to be a little lighter, but they're a good place to start. Both of these books are often used by people I associate with. There's Animal Spirit Guides by Stephen D. Farmer, right? There's Ted Andrews, Animal Speak.
I'm going to say Ted, yeah. I have that book, yeah.
Yeah, right? You know, it's a place to start anyway. It tends to be kind of a, you know, like it's cool, right? Lupa Greenwolf, or sometimes she just writes under Lupa, also does some great work about relationships with animals and relationships with plant spirits as well, right? And she's got this tarot deck that she's created, which we mentioned on the tarot episode, called the Tarot
Yes.
Bones, and that is all about, because of the work that she's done with associating with animals and their totemic value and the bones that come from their bodies. And and I love it. I think she's doing great work there, and I would really recommend that people check it out.
Yeah, definitely. There's certainly a lot of people doing bone readings and workings and things like that within the hoodoo and voodoo community. So yeah, check them out and see. I mean, it's not something traditionally that we would do in Santeria or in Haitian Voodoo. New Orleans Voodoo is a bit more eclectic. My own priestess does read with bones and a combination of things in a geomancy type way. Yeah, that's all I pretty much have to say about that.
Right.
Yay, we did it.
I think we did it. I think we managed to cover just about everything. I can't think of anything else I wanted to say, and it was relatively short, so good for us.
Yay. Yay.
All right, so we're sorry we're late on this one. That's my fault. That's because I've been doing National Novel Writing Month, and I could not coordinate my schedule effectively because I'm busier than I normally am, and Lilith is as busy as she always is, so it just didn't work. But
yes, I'm busy and tired. Forgive us.
Yes. So I promise we'll be more on time with the next one. But I still don't know what the topic is. Please let us know. We're always like scratching our heads the week before,
Yeah,
going,
right?
what haven't we done yet? So, if there's anything you want to hear, tell us.
Yeah. Sounds good. Keep watching. Like,
Yep.
subscribe.
Thank you very much, guys.
Read the blog.
Yep. Bye, guys. See you next time.